Hi and welcome. This is Lockdown TV from Unheard. So today we have a very different kind of interview. First of all, we are leaving the blue walls of the studio for the first time. Yes, we are going 3D all the way down to the Saudi residence in London, the place where the ambassador lives, because we have the opportunity to talk to him. This is the newly installed ambassador from Saudi Arabia to London. He is a man called Prince Khalid Bandar. And he's a particularly interesting person for us because, first of all, the country itself is at the centre of controversy, as it has been for decades. It is thought of as pretty much the epitome of everything that's wrong with the world by the political left, and frankly even the political right aren't that keen to talk about it. So I'm really looking forward to putting some of those difficult questions to him around human rights and gender equality, but also the recent murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and just really hear what he has to say about those things. But before that, I really want to get to the bottom of what it feels like for him, because he is an almost unique character in the Saudi regime, because his father was a man called Prince Bandar, who was Saudi ambassador to Washington for 25 years. His sister is now the new ambassador to Washington. He's ambassador to London. So they are the kind of most westernized face of the Saudi regime. He went to school in the UK, university here. He's married to a British woman, has half British kids. So I want to get a sense of what does it feel like to be in two such completely opposite cultures, and how do you reconcile those two very different worlds? So there's a lot to talk about with him, and as always, we will ask the questions, he will give the answers, and you will have to judge whether you find them convincing. But it's an extraordinary opportunity, it hasn't happened before, and here goes.
Your Royal Highness, thank you so much for having us. We're in the very grand surroundings of the official residence in London. You are newly installed, or less than a year, as ambassador here. By way of background, you are a senior prince of the Saudi royal family, but you've also spent a lot of time in England. You went to Eton and Oxford and Sandhurst. It's almost the kind of education of empire days. What values do you think you picked up from all of that education?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for having me. The most impact, having studied here, and previous to that I had lived in the States, is to realize that regardless of where you're from, what culture you grow up in, human beings are essentially the same. People in Riyadh or Jeddah or London or Manchester or Washington or New York are all human beings. They have the same wants, desires. Sure, cultures are different, societies are different, but by and large, we're much more similar than people think we are. Sets me up for what my role here should be, which is to bridge gaps between cultures and hopefully bring people together rather than push them apart.
So do you think, I guess you're on the kind of westernized edge of the very large Saudi royal family. Do you think that it gives you a particular understanding having spent that much time here?
A question, I having gone to school and university here, I know certainly British life quite well. I have a lot of British friends. Some of my closest friends are from my time at school and university.
Your wife, you've married an English
correct
lady. I mean, was that a first for the Saudi royal family?
I mean, not a first, but it was. It's certainly few and far between who have married Western women, and we didn't quite overlap at university, but we had the same group of friends. And she came and lived in Saudi for 7 years before I was posted abroad as a diplomat. It's been a lovely example of the fact that regardless of how different two civilizations can be, two different societies, you can find a wonderful meeting ground, and our children are a good example of that. And I think it's the way of the world that we live in now. It's a multicultural world. It's a small world, and I'm very privileged to have had the opportunity to see many different things in different places.
So your kids are half British, half Saudi.
Yes.
What sort of lives will they have now? I mean, are they Muslim, for example?
They are Muslim. I mean, they're too young to really know the difference. They're definitely Saudi and they're definitely British. And my belief is that they should chart their own path of what they are, who they are. The important thing is to provide them the general scope and let them become who they are. As I said, they're quite young at the moment, but they should be proud of both heritages.
Do you think there are things, seeing both sides of this extraordinary wide divide, do you think there are things that your sort of British friends could never understand about your Saudi life and vice versa?
Well, I don't think it's a case of they could never understand. And a good example of that is my wife. She lived in Saudi, and her point of view about Saudi Arabia is a much more nuanced one than it was before she knew me, much more nuanced than a lot of our friends. But even their interaction with me regularly shows them a much deeper insight into what Saudi Arabia is, what it's about, what the people are like. If you look at Saudi Arabia in particular and our part of the Middle East, it is the foundation of society is so different. It's not agrarian, it's not about landholdings, it's a Bedouin nomadic society, and that produces a totally different set of ideals for a culture. Probably a discussion for a sociologist to have, but it's a very different starting point. You just have to be willing to open your eyes to it. We haven't always done the best job of showing people what it's all about. What we've been doing in the last 3-4 years, opening up the country, making it easier for people to come in, is about allowing them to see what Saudi Arabia is all about. And it's not that difficult. Plenty of people get to know it quite well.
So when you leave your home in the English countryside, I understand there's even a pub in your home in the countryside. I mean, that's something that we all would have liked to have during these lockdown periods. You then get on a plane and then you land in Riyadh, and you come down into a totally different universe. What does that feel like? Do you feel like you're sort of adjusting who you are as you get off that plane?
No, I don't think that. My experience is that you sort of just switch. It's not much different to driving on the right-hand side of a car or left-hand side of a car. If you do it enough, you don't realize you've switched sides. And it's the same driving, it's the same principles, it's all the same, it's just from a different point of view. There's no doubt that they are very different cultures, and it was perhaps more difficult for a younger person to adjust. But again, you realize that by and large, you don't have to be a different person to be part of two different cultures. You can be the same person. Where it is sort of, there's a unique element, is that you can see both societies from the outside as well as the inside. And that's when you start noticing the similarities, but also the differences. And they're both there.
Does that mean you feel an outsider in Saudi?
No, but I can step back and look at it as the way an outsider would. I think that I have a fairly good understanding of certainly British society, and I certainly have a good understanding of Saudi society. So you do have the ability to look at it from a slightly outsider's point of view before going into it.
Saudi Arabia has a controversial reputation around the world, and a lot of British people will presume that it's not a very nice place, probably. I mean, to run by Sharia law is the law of the land. There are public beheadings in the town squares. Women are required by law to be covered from including their faces. Adultery, homosexuality, these things are illegal. To a normal British person, that sounds like a kind of medieval and really not very nice place to be. Are we wrong to presume that?
You're not wrong to presume that, but not all of that is absolutely correct. It is a very different culture. The development and the change that's happened in society in Saudi Arabia has been dramatic over the last 100 years. And I always tell people that my grandfather used to go to work on horseback. My father flew fast jets, and a cousin of mine was the first Arab in space. And that's in 3 generations. And God knows the gap between that and my children and the world that they grow up in. We've moved from a very, very different place 100 years ago to where we are today, and we're continuing to develop. But you have to take things for what they are and look at the society as a whole and what it wants. You can't give people something that they don't want. They won't take it, they won't receive it. You have to slowly bring people along and allow them to develop. What you need to do as a government is try and push it in a positive direction. If you look around the world, there's a lot of places that are regressing and going backwards. I firmly believe that Saudi Arabia is moving positively in the right direction, and we have such a young population, and the world they want is very different to the world my grandfather wanted, but the gap in time is not so big. And we've opened up quite a lot in the last 4 or 5 years.
What's interesting hearing you talk is that you sound like a liberal. This sounds like a Western liberal who basically looks at those customs I just talked about as kind of backward or bad, and that progress, as you describe it, is away from those towards a more sort of Western future. Is that how you see it?
No, not at all. It's not about Western, Eastern. It's about what is right for your people at a particular time. You've seen some of the changes in the last 3 years, women driving, for instance. I don't have a problem with women driving. Most people in Saudi today don't have a problem with women driving, and you can see that because women are driving and they're doing it successfully and doing it fine, and the country hasn't collapsed. Fire and brimstone hasn't rained down upon the country and destruction. It happened, it changed, people moved on. But people innately have a fear of any change, whatever it may be. And quite often, and this is why it's important to move away from the question of being Western or Eastern or a particular label like that. It is progress. However you feel that progress should take you is where you should be going, hopefully in a positive direction. And what's right for people at a particular time. You can't always be what the other person is. Sometimes you have to be yourself. And we're proud of who we are, where we came from, and what we are. We're proud of our culture, our society, our norms. And just because we're a monarchy doesn't mean that people don't have a say or an opinion or an effect on where we go. We try very hard in order to move the country in the direction. And Iran is a good example. Iran was open and liberal in many ways, but what replaced what was liberal in a societal way? Something that was fairly illiberal. People make their own decisions for themselves, and you can't stop populations moving.
I mean, this is, in a sense, this is the opposite question to the normal kind of question you might get asked about this, might you be missing something that the religious part of the Saudi community are understanding? Those ultra-conservatives, what they want to preserve in some way is not to become Western. They think there's something sacred, I presume. What do you think they have got right and that needs to be defended from just becoming another Westernized country?
Well, without question, religion is at the heart of the country. It is a very devout society. Religion is part of daily life in a way that you don't see in some Western countries where religion has moved further away from the daily life of people. In Saudi, it's part and parcel of what we do every day. Going to the mosque isn't something you do once a week. You do it every day. It is part of the culture that we grew up in. I consider myself a fairly devout person. I may be liberal in some senses. I might be very conservative in other senses. But it's about developing what is right for us.
So that religiosity, you think, is something that you want to protect?
Definitely. Without question, we want to protect it. It is at the heart of who we are. It's something that we're very proud of. Where we have an issue with religion is when religion is hijacked by people who want to promote themselves or their own issues. And we've seen a lot of that. And I think part of Islam is the ability to adapt. Where I think it's very important for us to be careful is, as you rightly pointed out, we don't want to lose that. And you don't want to move people away from it. You want them to make their choices. And I've always felt that the ultra conservative have pressed too hard and they turn people off. And then people reject it, not for the right reasons, but for the wrong reasons.
It's almost like, this might seem like an absurd parallel, but it's a kind of magnified version of the Brexit question where and in fact a lot of these countries that are having populist revolts in the West,
Yeah.
there's a kind of elite who are internationalist and progressive, and then there's a large part of the society who doesn't want to change like that.
It's a very similar issue, and often we get criticized for not doing this or not doing that or not doing this. Well, you know what? We've got to do what people want to do as much as what you think is right. It may be right for you in London or New York, but it may not be right for people in Riyadh or Jeddah or Dammam.
Let's take women and sort of gender equality as an example. I mean, is there not an element of wishful thinking here? I mean, yes, women are now allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. I believe since 2018 they're allowed to attend a football match in a stadium. They're allowed now, very recently, to travel abroad without a male guardian. But to most Western people, these will sound like, they'd be surprised that they weren't allowed for decades to be doing that. And I just wonder, a society that is based on Sharia law, which comes from 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, is that ever going to be compatible with any kind of gender equality in the way that Westerners understand it?
Absolutely. I mean, gender equality is not counter to Sharia law. Sharia law is often misunderstood. It is adaptable. And if you look out through the history of Islam, 1,500 years almost, things have adapted based on the circumstances that people are in. And it's possible. In 1956, we opened our first girls' school in Saudi Arabia, and there were riots all over the country. How could you educate women? You're destroying their purity, etc., etc., etc. Within 50 years, over 60% of graduate level students are women. The leap that's been made is huge. There are plenty of women in Saudi who still today don't think women should drive. Not just men, but women. When we did a poll, I remember in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, 40% of the population was against women driving. And I remember asking the question, what's the breakdown between men and women? And it was exactly the same. The same 40% of men and women didn't want women to drive. Part of it is a fear factor of something new, something alien, something that doesn't belong to us. And once the change happens, things move along. I'm 43 and I'm older than 80% of the country. So the youth, which are now the majority, may want a very different world to me, and almost certainly they do. You have to give and build the world for them, not the world for you. Otherwise, you're always living in the past. We want to be living in the future, and we want to be moving, particularly in this, we live in such a fast-paced world today that catching up is no longer good enough. You have to move twice as fast as the person in front of you, just to catch up before you can, be playing on the same field. Otherwise, we will always be a developing nation.
So take something like these executions that I mentioned, that is one of the things that people find horrific. The executions with a sword, no less, because that's what is required by Sharia law, so beheadings.
Not all executions are by the sword, but
a decent portion of them. Are you against that?
I'm not personally, but I believe different things.
So you're not against decapitating people in a public square?
No, I'm not
sword?
against executions.
Right.
Capital punishment. I mean, I've never seen a beheading myself. It's not something that happens that regularly in Saudi. There are very few punishments actually carry that, and it's the most extreme crimes that carry that punishment. Look, cultures are different. The basics of what one thinks is right and wrong is going to be different. It's a very complicated question, and there are many arguments. The most important thing is, I think myself, most people I know, most Saudis I know, are willing to have that discussion. They're willing to be convinced if you can provide them with a credible argument. And there are plenty of them. The important thing is to be discussing these things. The important thing is to have the ability to open your mind to other people's opinions. And that goes both ways. But if you were to ask and do a straw poll of what most people agreed with in Saudi, you'd find many of it is different. And that's part of the societal differences. We're not all going to become the same country. And that's just life. We are different. We have to understand each other. The best way, if you want to change someone's point of view, is to give them a good argument. People listen to good arguments. What they don't listen to is being told what to do and being lectured. And where it will be in 5-10 years, I can't tell you.
One place of where it might be in 5-10 years. There's a much publicized 2030 plan, and the jewel in that project is this new city that is going to be built by the Red Sea, Neom. It's almost like a kind of new Dubai, or it's a kind of ultra-futuristic, tourist-friendly place that almost seems to have nothing to do with the old Saudi. How do you reconcile those things?
It's more than just a city. It's a whole region and a development of a region in Saudi Arabia, which is, I mean, I've been up there. It's beautiful. And there's areas of historical significance. There's beautiful coastline. It's empty. There really is very little in it as far as people are concerned.
There are some people there, aren't there?
There are some people there.
What's happening to them?
They're still there. There's a big program. The organization that runs NEOM is running training programs to try and get as many people who are there trained and educated to be part of the development. People who want to leave are being resettled, given land and houses elsewhere. The world moves, the world changes, the world develops. You can't move forward without being bold. Our region has been in a rather difficult place for the last 100 years. And we've spent most of it looking backwards. It's now time to look forwards. That doesn't mean getting rid of everything, but it means developing it.
So one of the most difficult issues that Saudi has had in the past 2 years was the death of Jamal Khashoggi. He was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul by government agents. You've described it as a stain. Do you feel ashamed of that event?
I feel ashamed of any murder, but particularly ashamed by the actions of people who not only represented the Saudi state, but represented the Saudi culture and the Saudi people. That is not, and I've said this before, it's not how we do things, it's not who we are. I wish to God we could take it back, but it happened, and the important thing is now to deal with it. It's an awful event, and one feels for the family of Jamal Khashoggi and for the whole Saudi population to have this associated with them.
So how could it have happened within a... Was it ordered by the Crown Prince?
No, certainly not.
Do you know
sadly,
who ordered it?
Well, I don't know. I thank God I don't understand the minds of people who do something like that.
Has there been any advance in understanding who made the order? And
no, well, we know the people who carried it out. I can't talk too much about the investigation because it's not closed yet. Once it's closed, that information will be released, and the stories behind it will be released. But we have very little to work with apart from essentially the words of the people who were there. We've been given very little evidence. You don't forget the crime didn't happen in Saudi, so we don't have control of the evidence that was there, whatever it may be. But it's the investigation is running and justice is being carried out. People who were put on trial, investigation was done, some have been convicted. It's now at an appeals level. We have done things. We have restructured our security services as a result. So we are trying to adjust to it. But I wish it would never happen.
So on the fundamental question of where the order came from and why it happened, there's no answers.
There's nothing I can talk about at the moment. But definitely, and I know the Crown Prince. It did not come from him. It would not have come from him. The Saudi government has a long history of how it does things, and we haven't changed that much over in our mentality of the way we do things. We don't do these kind of things. I wish I could take it back. I wish it never happened. But it did. We have to come to terms with that. We have to take it on our shoulders. The Crown Prince has come out and said, it happened on my watch. And I take responsibility for that. And I will make sure it doesn't happen again. And, I trust him that that's where we're going to go, and that's the way we're going to go. And I hope the rest of the world does as well.
So let's sort of zoom out and look at, that took place in Turkey. The Crown Prince and yourself, you have a big in tray of issues looking around the region and around the world. There is the kind of long-standing, almost kind of Cold War with Iran.
The issue between us and Iran is unfortunate. We have tried numerous occasions over the last 40, 50 years to bridge that gap. We haven't got very far. Saudi Arabia is a country that is not interested in getting involved in the domestic politics or interfering in other countries. Unfortunately, our neighbor in Iran does, and it has so repeatedly, and has been doing so since the revolution in 1979. Let's not forget, it is a revolutionary government, which in its very constitution is about spreading that revolution, not just to the region, but to the world. And as Saudi Arabia is host to the two holiest cities of Islam, we are the number one country in their sights.
But if that's the case, if Saudi doesn't want to influence the affairs of other countries, why did you invade Yemen or get so involved militarily in that conflict on one side? They're your neighbours to the south. Why not leave them alone?
Same reason the world got involved in Bosnia or Kosovo. There was a democratically elected government, brand newly democratically elected, that was removed by a small minority of tribesmen who have now grown in size, and removed a chosen government by the Yemeni people. We went in with the UN mandate to try and restore the democratically elected government. That conflict was running for 2 or 3 years before we got involved, but it was getting out of control.
Is it in control now?
It's not in control, otherwise it'd be finished. We are working very hard. From the very beginning, one of the things we misjudged, and that's a big word, but we misjudged Iran's determination to turn the conflict in Yemen into something much bigger than what it was. And they may not at times have done it directly, they may have done it indirectly, they may have done it. There's a huge number of ways that they've gotten involved, but they've been behind every event that's made it worse. We have, since mid-April, we've called a unilateral ceasefire. We are not taking any military action. As a result of what's happened through COVID, we want to focus on the health of the Yemeni people. The other side hasn't stopped. They're continuing, and they're taking advantage of the ceasefire. We'll deal with it because we have bigger issues to worry about, which is the health of people as a result of the pandemic. But you need the other side to want to stop as well.
Is the ceasefire the beginning of cutting your losses and pulling out of Yemen?
If we pulled out tomorrow, the conflict wouldn't end. The conflict will get worse. We don't want to be there, and I've heard it reported, and we've been presented as the country that wants to continue this conflict. We've suffered as a result of the conflict in a variety of ways: economic, physical. We've lost people. We've been attacked. Conflict is not a nice thing. I've said this before. Anybody who wants war is a madman. We would like to get out of it. We would like it to end, but we want a political solution. And if it's not quite there yet, we welcome everyone's help in getting to that political solution. And many countries have done so. We've been very supportive of the United Nations and the Special Representative Martin Griffiths in his work there. And we support him fully. We will back what he wants to achieve, which is peace. But you need all the sides to want peace. And right now, they're just not there yet, unfortunately.
Moving around the geography a little bit, one relationship that seems to be improving is that with Israel. At least, for example, there was a lot of talk about a Saudi TV program that has been popular during the Ramadan period that shows a world pre-1948 with Jews and Arabs living successfully and harmoniously together. And a lot of commentary has been that this is part of a kind of deliberate attempt to begin to warm up the Saudi people to the idea that Israel can be an ally, not a foe. Is that true?
Listen, the relationship or lack thereof with Israel is there for historical reasons. We're probably the last country in the region not to recognize Israel, or one of. All the neighbors recognize and have open relations with Israel. It is a reality that we have to live with. It is there. However, we have always had a commitment to the Palestinian people and what is fair for them. Until we find a solution that suits them, that is fair for the Palestinians, we will always be behind the Palestinians. Will we have to live with an Israeli state? I don't see how we wouldn't. Are we at the stage where we're going to be opening up to a relationship? If it's fair to the Palestinian people, if it's something they're happy with, then we will do it. But we will not move forward without the interests of the Palestinian people squarely at the heart of whatever we do.
So the fact that you now have common foes in the form of Iran and now these Muslim Brotherhood countries is not enough to make common cause with the Israelis.
On that issue, it's not. Where we go from here, the world is an evolving place. You look at, and a good example of how quickly things can change in the region, there's the conflict in Yemen. In the 1960s, we were involved in a conflict in Yemen, supporting the grandfathers of the Houthis, fighting against the southern separatists, who were Marxist, who were being supported by the Egyptians. And the British were helping us with the northern tribes fight the southern tribes. And we were being supported by the Iranians against the war against Egypt. I mean, it's the same players, but the whole situation was reversed. Time can change things. We'll have to see where we develop, particularly now where we're in very uncertain times and where things are going.
So the other big, you've been hit by COVID, less reported, but otherwise would be hugely reported, was the collapse in the oil price just a couple of weeks before the pandemic really hit. This seems to be partly a price war situation with Russia, but is also to do with collapsing demand now because of the pandemic. This is the lifeblood of your economy. It's the foundation of the state. How are you going to fare in a world where oil production isn't profitable?
Well, it's not the foundation of the state. The state existed for 40 years before oil was important. And we managed that far. I'm sure we'll manage moving forward. But what it does is it highlights the importance of Vision 2030, the importance of the plan laid forward by the Crown Prince to move the country away from oil, to diversify our economy, to open up opportunities for Saudi citizens to work, live, and thrive in a society that's not solely based on government jobs and oil revenue.
It's going to change the whole country, isn't it? I mean, for example, you've already put up taxes. I understand VAT for the first time has gone up and now is going up again in July. That's, it's existed on this kind of almost limitless funds coming through oil, and the population are used to that. If it has to transition to a more normal country where people pay taxes in return for services, it could fundamentally alter the whole political settlement.
Sure, it's much more difficult considering what's going on, but we have to move away from the old system of relying on oil to provide for everything. It is not, regardless of oil demand due to COVID, oil is a finite resource. It will run out eventually. Not only is it finite, but we are finding better ways to do things than use oil. And so we want to focus on the world beyond it. If we can do it and still have oil left, great.
So you're not worried about the political impacts within Saudi of having to tax people more and having to move to that kind of more regular? No, what sort of impact might that have?
I'm not worried about it. The UK its evolution, political evolution, is an interesting one to look at. It had periods of change and development and pressure. It never really boiled over into disaster. It evolved. It had a situation, things got difficult, and they found a way through it. It had points where it moved forward, some where it moved back, but it's been a constant and positive evolution. And I think, if there's one thing we want to learn from our friends here in the UK is we can evolve. It is doable. And I think you're seeing that. Our government has evolved and changed bit by bit over the last 100 years. We've got municipal elections. We have women who vote in municipal. We have women who run in municipal elections. This is stuff that 30 years ago people would have thought you were mad if you told them that's what would happen in Saudi. It happens.
So we've toured around the world's problems and the various difficulties that Saudi faces. When you look at the whole world situation, what are you most worried about of all of these things? And what do you think the biggest threat is to Saudi and also to the whole global stability?
The last few years, you've seen growth in populist movements. You've seen a sort of isolationist spirit start to creep into many countries. You've seen, and I hesitate to say a new Cold War, we're not there yet, but human nature often likes to find the other. And I fear for the other mentality developing, particularly between East and West. There is a natural power play, that can bifurcate the world between the United States and China, which are the two obvious candidates for a difficulty. I think that right now there's too much that holds them together for that to happen, but the biggest danger comes from when people aren't planning for the unforeseeable. That'll never happen, don't worry about it. That's when it does happen. And I think we need to...
You mean that it could actually turn into a conflict?
Yes, because people are dismissing it as impossible. The impossible very quickly becomes possible if you're not ready for it. And I think, for Saudi Arabia, that's the last thing that we need, and I think it's the last thing that anyone needs. But there is a great role there for a country like Saudi Arabia, for a country like the United Kingdom, to help manage that process between East and West, to show that in this complicated, difficult world, you can work together.
But if it comes down to this sort of US versus China, I mean, Saudi presumably is, at the end of the day, on Team US.
Well, certainly the United States is one of our oldest allies. We will be working hard not to let it come to that. But the more of us working to that end and to that goal, the less likely that split will happen. If we just sit and watch it, well, nobody wants to think about where we'll be at that stage. And these things happen quickly. Don't forget that in 1945, Russia was an ally of the United States and Western Europe. 1948, Winston Churchill was talking about the Iron Curtain. It didn't take long for that jump to happen. And that was at a time that does not move as fast as we do today. So I think we need to be very wary, very careful. I don't think there's a person around today, in a position of power that actually wants it to go that direction. But it's very easy in the current climate, in the world we live in, with social media, with the fast-paced news cycle, little things can get out of control. And I think what we need to do is, slow down, take a deep breath, slow down, I'm in a hurry sort of mentality.
What does that mean for you?
We have an amazing opportunity to write the next 100, 200 years of history today. And to be involved in that, I think, is a unique opportunity, and I just hope that I'm up to the job.
Prince Khalid Bandar, thank you very much.
Thank you.